Welcome everybody to the Matt Mettler podcast broadcast. It's my great pleasure to be here with you, my viewers and watchers and or listeners. It's a great pleasure to have you here with me. I'm glad that you could join me for this episode. I promised you guys some extra content since I was working a lot last week. I promised that I'd make a few extra shows and try and get you some extra content. And so I wanted to get down here and do a little bit of extra recording today. I'm doing a little bit of cleanup around the shop. I'm going to set up a shelf after I get done doing this podcast. And I'm trying to get the studio in shape so that I might invite guests over, and I might start doing some recording that involves guests. And JJ was a special exception because he doesn't care how the place looks, right? He's just excited to be here. But I'm trying to get the place all together so that it will be beautiful and lovely to have some sort of person come over and visit me here at the studio. So I'm trying to make that happen today. I don't have a ton of show notes, but I want to try and create a short show for you guys today. Seems like you guys are warming up, or you're very hip to these shorter shows, right? Seems like when I create a video that's a little bit shorter, it gets more views. I could see why, because it requires less of an investment of time to hear what I have to say. So, we'll see how long this one goes, but if it doesn't go too long, maybe that's okay too. I was thinking about the world as a game, and I don't mean that to mean that the world isn't serious, right? But if you look at the world as a game, which is one of the foundational corners of Scientology, Dianetics, is that view the world as a game and you'll already be ahead, right? Because like a game, the world is built on rules. And like Morpheus says, some can be bent, others can be broken. Right? So the world really kind of is a game. And like I said, I don't mean to try and downplay its seriousness. It's a game for life or death. It's a game for success or failure, right? But it's a game nonetheless. It has the rules of a game. It has the constructs of a game, right? So if you view the world as a game and that world, that game has rules, the better you can know the rules, the better you will do at the game. So there's some wisdom hidden in there, right? The better you can know the rules, the better you will be at playing the game. And that pretty much sums up our entire legal system here in America, is that if you know the rules and you're better at playing the game than the other people, then you will be the most successful person in that battle. I wanted to talk a little bit about mixed messages. If you guys have been watching my show for a bunch of episodes now, you'll know that occasionally I like to address the topic of mixed messages. I feel like the world sends a huge number of mixed messages to people in general. And today's mixed message is about the workplace dynamic between men and women in corporate America, and the fact that it is now extremely confusing. It really is, right? Because it's one of these be careful what you wish for moments, I think, honestly. It's one of those moments where we should all be very careful what we wish for, right? Because I was feeling this at the place that I was working before I left, that I felt like I couldn't even talk to a female in the workplace or give her a compliment without it being some form of sexual harassment, which is really messed up because, let's be honest, not all women in the world want the same thing. There are plenty of women who are perfectly content to be housewives, to love their men, things like that. And they don't view it as some sort of negative that they do those things. They're perfectly happy doing those things, right? Likewise, I'm sure that there are men out there that really love to take care of their women and really enjoy the feeling of making them feel special, right? There's something to be said for that, people. If you got somebody that treats you that way, keep a hold of them, because people that treat you like you're special are really hard to find. They're really hard to come by. So if you got somebody who really looks at you like you're special, then they are special. You should keep that person close to you, right? But the workplace dynamic between men and women is very difficult now, because I felt like I was put into a place where I no longer knew if I could even smile at somebody. I didn't even know if I was allowed to give them a warm smile without that being misinterpreted in some bogus way, right? Because just because you give somebody a warm smile doesn't mean that you're going to ask them out on a date. Just because you give somebody a warm glance does not mean that you are going to try and have some sort of workplace relationship with them, right? So, and then that's the other part of it too, is that it seemed like the only thing that actually delineated workplace harassment from flirting was how it was perceived by the target. If the woman liked it, it was fine. If the woman didn't like it, it was sexual harassment, right? And that is a very tough and gray area for men to be in, right? Because it's not all that unusual for two people to meet at work or for two people to meet in the workplace or to form a bond or a relationship in the workplace and then have a relationship outside of that workplace. That's pretty common. You know, you spend quite a bit of time with the people that you work with. For 6 years, I spent more time with the people at work than I did with people I care about. Most of you are probably the same way. Most of you probably spend 40 hours a week with the people that you work with, and you probably don't spend 40 hours a week with your family. So it is very difficult now for a man to navigate the mine-filled waters of the corporate environment, trying to be a good person, right? Because let's face it, women of the world, at least a good portion of them, really enjoy it when you say, wow, your outfit looks really nice today. I really love how your shoes match your bag. You know what I mean? A lot of women in the world still love those sorts of compliments. They're glad you noticed. That was part of why they did it, was so in the hopes that somebody would notice. And now we're creating this environment where you're not even allowed to be polite. You're not even allowed to be nice without it possibly coming back to blow up in your face as a man. So ladies, I mean, if that's what you want, if what you want is an environment where, and to me, it's sort of funny because you asked for equality as long as it's not equal, right? You want equalities as long as it's not equal, because to be equal would be to be shown no advantage in the workplace. To be equal would be to be shown no extra consideration whatsoever. To be equal would be to have expectations for, you know, sucking it up and driving on and not being an individual, right? So, because from a man's perspective, that's how the world treats you. The world doesn't offer you any special anything. It doesn't give you any special room. It doesn't give you nothing, right? And this whole, you know, card that they try and say that I own or possess, man, I wish somebody would give me that card because I've never actually seen it. I've never actually seen it. Yeah, I don't think that card actually exists. I think that's going to lead me into my next topic. My next topic is that we live in two worlds. We live in two worlds, the one that we talk about and the one that we don't talk about very often. A good example of this is the Jeffrey Epstein thing, with the whole Jeffrey Epstein case boiling to the surface and potentially about to blow up into an enormous case that will probably trip up all kinds of rich and powerful people. Jeffrey Epstein swung in a circle of rich and powerful people. And if you think he didn't have some dirt on people, you'd be mistaken, right? I think part of the reason that he ended up dead was to cover up the fact that he has so much information on so many different people. I don't know, man. I think that's a very interesting thing. The timing around his death in jail seems kind of intriguing from a standpoint of they should have never left him alone long enough to commit suicide, knowing what a high-profile person he was, right? So it seems utterly unusual or uncanny that happened, for sure. Yeah, so we live in two worlds, the one that we talk about and the one that we do not talk about. And most of us as adults know it. We just choose to ignore that entire side of the world because we don't like talking about it. We find it unpleasant to talk about, and therefore we do not talk about it. It's an interesting thing about the world, right? That there are two worlds, the one that we talk about and the other one that exists in the shadows that we do not talk about. I think George Carlin was pretty much dead on, right, in his comedy. I've been watching a lot of George Carlin lately, and I think that George Carlin really knew what he was talking about, man. He really had his finger right on the pulse of what was really going on in America. And I miss George Carlin for that reason. I think that he was the ultimate truth teller, right? He did not care to sugarcoat it or candy coat it in any way. He would just straight up tell you the truth. And if you didn't like it, you would have to just sort of come to terms with it afterwards. We probably need some of that in America right about now. We could probably use a little bit of that in America right about now, no doubt. My next topic, I love to surf Craigslist, man. I love to surf Craigslist and look at the shit that's for sale on there. It's almost like, it's so ridiculous. I feel like Joe Dirt when I'm going through Craigslist, because you remember that part when he's in the well in Joe Dirt and he's like, he's looking at like the Mini Trucker magazine, or he's looking at, Auto Trader. That's what it is. He's looking at Auto Trader and he says, 7,500, I'll give you 750. Right? That's pretty much exactly how I feel as I go through the Craigslist ads, looking at like amplifiers and stuff. I'm always looking for like tone on a budget, right? I'm a frugal gourmet when it comes to tone on a budget, right? So I love to look at Craigslist and see who's got what out there and how much they're asking for it. But I'm so Joe Dirt when it comes to that stuff, because somebody will have on there, like for instance, I saw a Macintosh amplifier from like the late 60s. I want to say like 1969 or something like that. Highly, highly coveted amplifier. They only want like $3,000 for it, right? Too rich for the Matt Mettler blood. There's no way that I would be caught buying some sort of amplifier that is that expensive per watt, right? Another good example is there's somebody out there that's got like a Silvertone or Sears, I think maybe it's Sears, tube amp, which they made back in like the late 60s. Yeah, they made tube amps. Tube amps were common. Tube amps were the only kind of amplifiers that there were for a certain period of time, right? So they were super common. So everybody made them. So there's one that's like, probably a 10-watt amplifier, but the guy wants like $1,000 for it, right? Which is $100 a watt. And that is entirely too rich for the Matt Mettler frugal blood tube tone on a budget. I mean, it's a collectible, right? It's a collector's item, and I appreciate that. I respect that. But for me, no, Matt Mettler won't be owning anything that's $100 a watt. I can assure you that. Yeah, I'm not that nostalgic about it. So yeah, so I love to surf Craigslist and look at all the equipment that's out there. I look for just all kinds of band equipment, sound equipment, stuff like that. I love to look through there. As a matter of fact, Craigslist is great because I could look at anything. I'll look at collectibles or trailers. I've been looking at trailers a lot because I want to build a tiny house, right? So you want to build a tiny house, you need a trailer for that. And every single thing on the planet is on Craigslist. I love to surf Craigslist and look through it. It's just so funny to me. It's like the thrifty nickel of the internet era for sure. Another thing that's been sort of interesting is since I've moved back into the concert/entertainment business, I feel like I'm living on the dark side of the planet again. For 12 years more, let's see, from about 1991 until about 2007, I lived on the dark side of the planet. Like spending much more time on the night side of the planet than on the sunny side of the planet. And so I've kind of been creeping slowly back into my nighttime mode, which is, I don't know. I'm trying to keep a normal daytime schedule, but my mom said something funny. She said, "You were born at night." She goes, "You've always been a nighttime person." I never really thought about it like that, but yeah, I always have been kind of a nighttime person. It's kind of funny. I think that pretty much wraps it up. I didn't actually have any other show notes. Yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and wrap it on up, man. I just want to say thank you so much for joining me here for the Matt Mettler podcast. Please make sure that you like, subscribe, share, comment, talk about it with your friends. I want to hear people's opinions. I want to talk to folks about things. So if you have something to say and you want to, get a hold of me, do it. Don't be afraid. I'm an easygoing guy. I'm actually a super easy guy to talk to. So feel free to contact me, and if you got something you'd like to talk about, all right? Thank you so much for joining me here on the Matt Mettler podcast. The Matt Mettler podcast is a Matt Mettler production, copyright 2019.